Berlin, November 1923. A woman burns cash in her fireplace, not out of anger, out of necessity. The paper money heated more than it bought. A loaf of bread cost 400 billion marks. 400 billion. And the price doubled every 6 hours. But here's what nobody tells you. While the German middle class watched their savings turn to ash, a small group didn't just survive, they got filthy rich. And the asset that saved them wasn't gold, it wasn't stocks, it wasn't real estate. It was something more dangerous, something most people fear, something that decides who dies poor and who walks through the collapse untouched. And America is 3 bad decisions away from reliving this story. I'm going to show you what that asset was. I'm going to show you why it works in any monetary crisis. And by the end, you'll understand why the wealthy never talk about it. Because if everyone knew, the game would be over. Stay until the end. Your portfolio depends on it. You need to understand something. Hyperinflation isn't an accident. It's not a calculation error. It's the last resort of a bankrupt government. When a state spends more than it collects for too long, it has 3 options. Raise taxes and lose power. Default on debt and lose credibility, or print money and rob everyone silently. Germany in 1923 chose the third, just like Venezuela in 2016, just like Zimbabwe in 2008, just like the United States almost did in the 1970s. And here's the pattern that always repeats. The middle class suffers the most. Why? Because they trust the system. They keep money in the bank. They believe the government will figure it out. They wait until it's too late. The rich don't wait. They understand a brutal truth. Money isn't wealth. Money is just the tool to measure wealth. And when the tool breaks, you need another one. Let's go back to Berlin. November 1923. The Weimar Republic had just printed so much money that a 1 trillion mark note was issued. 1 trillion. And it couldn't buy an egg. The average German lost everything. Retirees who saved money their entire lives became beggars. Teachers worked 2 jobs and still starved. The German middle class was literally exterminated. And that created fertile ground for Nazism. But that's another story. Now pay attention. While this was happening, German industrialists like Hugo Stinnes became billionaires. How? They took out massive loans in marks, bought factories, land, foreign companies. And when inflation exploded, they paid back the debts with money that was worthless. They transformed debt into fake money into real assets, and kept the assets. Here's the mechanism. In 1921, Stinnes borrowed 100 million marks from German banks. At that time, 100 million marks could buy a steel factory. He bought the factory. 2 years later, in 1923, those same 100 million marks couldn't buy a newspaper. He paid back the loan with pocket change, and owned the factory free and clear. The bank got destroyed. The depositors got wiped out. Stinnes got rich. This wasn't luck. This was strategy, and he didn't stop there. Stinnes understood something most people miss. In a hyperinflation, assets don't lose value. Currency loses value. A factory that produces steel still produces steel. A coal mine still produces coal. The numbers change. The utility doesn't. So he went on a buying spree. He borrowed more, bought more factories, more mines, more shipping companies, more newspapers. By 1923, he controlled 1,535 companies across Germany and Europe, hotels in Austria, newspapers in Hungary, oil fields in Romania, all bought with borrowed money, all paid back with worthless paper. The German government called him unpatriotic. The newspapers called him a vulture. The people called him a thief. But when the dust settled, Stinnes owned a quarter of Germany's industrial capacity. And the patriots, who kept their savings in marks, owned nothing. This is the lesson Wall Street doesn't want you to learn. Debt isn't always bad. Strategic debt is a weapon. And in a monetary collapse, it's the most powerful weapon there is. But it wasn't just in Germany. Hungary, 1946. Daily inflation of 207%. The Hungarian pengo became wallpaper. Literally. People glued notes to walls because paper was cheaper than paint. Who survived? The farmers. Why? Because food doesn't inflate. The value may rise in currency terms. But a kilogram of potatoes still feeds a family, and when currency dies, food becomes currency. But there's another group. The borrowers. Hungarian businessmen who owed money to Budapest banks saw their debts evaporate. A mortgage that seemed crushing in 1945 was paid off with 1 day's wages in 1946. They kept the property. The bank kept the worthless paper. Now jump to Zimbabwe, 2008. Inflation of 89.7 sextillion% per month. Yes, sextillion. $100 trillion notes were printed and couldn't buy bread. What saved people? US dollars, gold, and something more important. Skills, doctors, mechanics, electricians. They traded services for food, for protection, for access. Because when money dies, what remains is what you can do, what you can produce, what you can offer. But the real winners? The ones who borrowed Zimbabwean dollars to buy farmland, the ones who owed mortgages in local currency. By 2009, they owned their properties outright. paid in full with worthless bills. The pattern is clear across history. Strategic debt in a dying currency is a transfer of wealth from lenders to borrowers, from savers to buyers, from the trusting to the prepared. The asset wasn't gold, it wasn't land, it wasn't food, it was leverage. It was the ability to borrow in a currency you knew would collapse, and convert that borrowed money into things that would survive. Let me explain the mechanics. In Weimar, smart operators borrowed marks at 5% interest. Sounds reasonable, right? But when inflation is running at 1,000% per month, that 5% annual interest is a joke. You're being paid to borrow. They took those marks and bought real assets. Factories, equipment, inventory, buildings, anything physical, anything that would hold value when the paper burned. Then they waited 6 months, 1 year. The mark collapsed, and they paid back the loan with money that was worth 1/millionth of what they borrowed. The math is simple. Borrow 1 million marks, buy a factory worth 1 million marks. Wait for inflation. Pay back the loan with 1 million marks that now only buy a loaf of bread. Keep the factory. This is what Hugo Stinnes understood. This is what the German middle class didn't. They thought debt was dangerous. They thought saving was smart. They were conditioned to be good citizens, to trust the system, to play by the rules. And the rules destroyed them. Because in a hyperinflation, the rules reverse. Saving becomes suicide. Debt becomes wealth. The responsible behavior your grandmother taught you becomes the fastest way to poverty. And this brings us to the secret of 1923. The real asset wasn't physical. It was psychological. It was the willingness to do what scared everyone else. To borrow when everyone else was saving. To buy when everyone else was selling. To bet against the currency when everyone else believed. Now let's bring this to America, to the present, to you. The US dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1913. 98%. The savings of an average American in 1913 would buy 1/50th of what it bought then. And the government keeps spending more than it collects. The U.S. national debt is $35 trillion. And growing. The Federal Reserve has tried everything. Raised rates, lowered rates, quantitative easing, quantitative tightening. Nothing stops the underlying problem. Why? Because the problem isn't technical. It's political. No government wants to cut spending. No government wants to lose votes. So the solution is always the same. Print more. Roll the debt. Push the problem to the next administration. And who pays the bill? The middle class. The worker who saves in a 401k, the retiree who trusts Social Security, the American who believes the government will figure it out. I'm not saying America will become Weimar, but I'm saying the script is the same, and those who don't prepare now will pay the price later. Let me give you a concrete example. Argentina, inflation of 211% in 2023, 211%. The Argentine peso is toilet paper. And you know who's doing well in Argentina? Programmers, designers. Freelancers working for American companies. They earn in dollars, live like kings in Buenos Aires, while the Argentine doctor earning in pesos can barely pay rent. Same city, same inflation, completely different outcomes. The difference? One depends on local currency, the other doesn't. And this isn't new. When the US had inflation of 13% in 1980, who survived? Who had access to assets? Who had businesses that generated real value? Who had skills that crossed borders? The middle class who trusted their savings accounts lost 50% of their purchasing power in a decade. Their dollars rotted while they slept. But here's what most people miss about the Stinnes strategy. It wasn't just about borrowing. It was about what you bought with the borrowed money. Stinnes didn't buy luxury. He didn't buy consumption. He bought production capacity. Every mark he borrowed went into assets that produced value. Steel mills that made steel. Coal mines that extracted coal. Shipping lines that moved goods. These assets generated income, generated product, generated power. So even as the mark collapsed, his empire kept functioning. The factories kept running. The mines kept producing. The ships kept sailing. And all of it was paid for with debt that had evaporated. This is the critical distinction. Bad debt buys consumption. Good debt buys production. Stupid debt finances a lifestyle. Smart debt finances a system. And in a monetary collapse, only the producers survive. The consumers get slaughtered. Now comes the part that changes everything. The gap. What the wealthy know and you don't. While the masses run to gold, real estate, and Bitcoin after the crisis starts, the wealthy prepare before. And their number one move isn't tangible. It's strategic. It's invisible. It's devastating. It's leveraging dying currency to acquire immortal assets. Let me be direct. If you believe the dollar is losing value, the worst thing you can do is hold dollars. The second worst thing you can do is sell assets to hold dollars. The best thing you can do is borrow dollars and buy assets, because when the dollar falls, your debt falls with it. But your assets remain. You win twice. Once from asset depreciation, once from debt destruction. This is what real estate investors understood in the 1970s. They borrowed at fixed rates when inflation was low. Then inflation exploded. Their mortgage payments became trivial. Their properties soared in value. They became millionaires by accident. But most people don't understand this. They're terrified of debt. They pay off their mortgage early. They brag about being debt-free. And they miss the greatest wealth transfer in history. Because in an inflationary environment, debt is your friend. Fixed-rate debt is your weapon. And knowing how to wield it is the difference between poverty and wealth. Here's the trick. Not all debt works. Credit card debt at 25% interest will destroy you even in hyperinflation. Consumer debt for cars and toys will bury you. But productive debt at fixed rates is different. A mortgage at 3% when inflation is running at 8% means you're being paid 5% per year to borrow. A business loan at 6% that funds equipment generating 20% returns is free money. Debt used to acquire cash flowing assets is wealth creation. The wealthy understand this. That's why they're always leveraged. That's why they never pay off their mortgages. That's why they borrow against their portfolios. Because they know something you don't. In an inflationary system, cash is trash and debt is treasure. But here's where it gets dangerous. You need to know when to pull the trigger. Borrow too early and you get crushed by interest payments before inflation arrives. Borrow too late and you miss the window. Timing is everything. So how do you know? You watch the signals. When the government starts talking about temporary inflation, that's signal 1. When they say inflation is transitory, that's signal 2. When they start changing how they measure inflation to hide the real numbers, that's signal 3. That's when you move, that's when you borrow, that's when you convert paper into production. Let me give you the playbook. What to do now, before it's too late. First, identify assets that will survive currency collapse. Real estate in stable areas, productive businesses, equipment, inventory, commodities, things that have utility regardless of what happens to the dollar. Second, secure fixed-rate financing. Not variable, not adjustable. Fixed, lock in rates while they're still reasonable, because once inflation truly arrives, rates will soar, and by then, it's too late. Third, convert borrowed money into assets immediately. Don't sit on cash. Don't wait for a better deal. Buy the asset, transfer the risk to the lender. Let inflation do the rest. Fourth, ensure the asset generates cash flow. This is critical. You need income to service the debt until inflation destroys it. Rental properties, operating businesses, dividend stocks, something that pays you while you wait. Fifth, diversify across asset classes and geographies. Don't put all borrowed money into one property. Spread it across real estate, businesses, commodities, foreign assets, because you don't know which will perform best when things break. This is the Stinnes strategy updated for 2025. This is how you turn monetary collapse into generational wealth. This is what they don't teach you in school. Because if everyone knew, the banks would lose. Now here comes the uncomfortable part. The truth that hurts. Most people won't do anything with this information. They'll read this. They'll agree with everything. They'll say it makes sense, and they'll go back to normal life. They'll keep working the same job, earning in dollars, saving in the bank, hoping the government solves it, believing that this time is different. And when the crisis comes, and it always comes, they'll blame the system. They'll blame politicians. They'll blame the rich. But the truth is, they had the information. They had the chance. And they chose not to act. I can't save you. I can only show you the door. But you need to walk through. Let me tell you a real story. 1970s America. Inflation started exploding. A real estate investor named Sam Zell saw what was happening. He started borrowing millions of dollars, fixed rates, 30-year mortgages. Everyone thought he was insane. Zell's going to go bankrupt, they said. He's too leveraged, they said. He's reckless, they said. But Zell understood the game. He borrowed when money was worth something. He bought properties, and then he waited. Inflation exploded. His debt became worthless. His properties tripled in value. He became a billionaire. Today, Zell is worth billions, and the responsible savers who mocked him are still working at 70 because they played it safe. And safe is the most dangerous position in an inflationary environment. This is the difference between surviving and thriving. So here's the challenge. What are you going to do in the next 48 hours? Are you going to call a mortgage broker and explore fixed rate financing? Are you going to research cash flowing assets in your area? Are you going to create a plan to deploy strategic debt? Or are you going to scroll Instagram and forget all of this? Because the difference between who gets rich and who gets poor in the next crisis isn't luck. It isn't privilege. It's decision and action. The Germans of 1923, who borrowed marks before hyperinflation, became the new wealthy class. Those who saved burned money to stay warm. The Americans of the 1970s, who leveraged fixed-rate debt before inflation, retired rich. Those who played it safe worked until they died. And the Americans of 2025, who prepare now, will be the Zells of tomorrow. Those waiting will be statistics. One last thing. I know this sounds extreme. I know it sounds reckless. But let me ask you a question. If I'm wrong, what's the cost? You acquired assets with cheap debt. You diversified your holdings. You positioned yourself for multiple scenarios. You have more wealth and more security. What's the problem with that? Now flip it. If I'm right and you do nothing, what's the cost? You lose everything. Your savings turn to dust. Your salary doesn't buy food. And you have no way out. Because you didn't prepare. Asymmetric risk. Little to lose. Everything to gain. This is the logic of survivors. This is the logic of those who walk through crises and emerge stronger. The asset that saved the Germans in 1923 wasn't gold. It was the courage to borrow in a dying currency. It was the wisdom to convert paper into production. It was the strategy to let inflation destroy your enemies while you controlled the real economy. And that asset still works today, in Venezuela, in Argentina, in Turkey, in Lebanon, and it will work in America if necessary. The question isn't whether you'll need this. The question is whether you'll be ready when you do. Now it's up to you. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and join the community of survivors. Because the next videos will show you exactly how to build each piece of this puzzle, how to identify the best assets for debt leverage, how to secure financing before rates explode, how to build cash flow systems that survive any crisis, how to protect your wealth from any government. This isn't theory, it's the survival manual. And whoever gets there first takes the advantage. See you in the next video. And remember, the money will die again. The only question is whether you'll die with it.